Wonderland here, with a review of all the Emerald cards from the new set Rise of the Floodborn. But before we get into that, I'm going to talk about the rating system I use between 0 and 5 stars to help give reference to the star rating. Some examples would be Rapunzel, rated at about 5 stars. She sees lots of play, big role player, draws lots of cards, and can fit into almost every Amber deck as a 4 of. And at 4 stars, we have cards like Be Prepared, where they're so powerful that they can basically hold an archetype up by themselves, but might not be played in every single deck that can play them. Then at 3 stars, we have Flynn Rider, where it's just a solid card, has some good abilities, good lore, good cost, but it's not going to see play in every single deck that could play it. It tends to lean towards one type of archetype, and it's going to be in there, it's going to play some roles, but it's not going to be what pushes you into playing a deck on average. And at 2 stars, we have cards like Cheshire Cat, where it's not a bad card, but in general, I just kind of wish it was a little bit better almost every time I play it. And at 1 star, we have Healing Glow, where it just doesn't really do anything and is just overall a disappointment of a card. Now that these examples are out of the way, let's start with our review. At 4 cost, being a 4/3 with 2 lore, Arthur Trained Swordsman is just kinda there. Doesn't really do much, it's just a decent, limited filler, 1.0 constructed. Kinda looks cool though. Beast Relentless, costing 6 ink, being a 4/5 that quests for 2 lore, that readies whenever an opposing character is damaged. This card has created a lot of hype, and a lot of people are going to try to combo off with this by either using it to just attack in and destroy all of their opponent's characters, or to quest with it, attack one unit at something, untap it, quest with it, attack something, quest with it. Another way to read the text on this is like, whenever a character you control challenges, gain 2 lore, because you can just quest with it. It does have to untap to use it once though. Bell Hidden Archer, costs 5 to 3/3, quest for 3, impressive there, shift of 3, and whenever it's a challenge, the challenging character has to discard their hand. Entertaining. It'll make it quite hard to just kill in combat in the early game. Dies to smash if people are still playing it. Does not die to the new Song Shock. Has a high lore to it, but in general, I think it's a little bit weak for a legendary. It will probably gain some lore for you pretty well, but it's only really a 3.0. I think Cusco is probably still better because of the ward. Bell Bookworm, costing 3, being a 2/4. Lores for 1, and whenever your opponent has no cards in hand, it gets +2 on the lore. This card's kind of a trap because it's going to try to trick you into wanting to play with more discard than you want, although I still think it's a solid 2.5. It has the potential to gain that extra lore, and if you are able to break the discard deck, this is a nice payoff for it, but the fact that it's uninkable is like pretty bad for it. Costing 3, Bippity Boppity Boo is quite the powerful song. You can return a character of yours to your hand and play another character at the same cost or less for free. And while it does say another character, when that character you return to your hand is returned to your hand, it is considered a different character than the one that was when it was in play, since your hand is a hidden zone. So you can actually put the exact same character back into play if you want, to use it as a form of a blink effect on such things as Surfer Stitch. Bounce is a 2-cost action that you can return a character of yours to your hand and another chosen character to the owner's hand. There's potential for this card. It can really take advantage of your come into play abilities, and for that, it's going to get a solid 2.5. Has a lot of potential in the future, and I could see it returning all sorts of crazy cards. It could be another way in some of the older mill decks to return the lady to your hand, so you can replay it to return a whole new world, then recycle it that way, while also bouncing one of your opponent's characters to make your whole new world even more backbreak. But it can't be inked, and that's like a pretty big issue. In the green aggro, while it seems not that intuitive to play this, it does allow you to give your characters a quasi untap. So your Cusco is just extra protected, so you can attack with it, play bounce, get rid of your opponent's lore or their attacker that was going to attack a different character, and then replay Cusco, and they can't really deal with it as easy without a Be Prepared or a couple damage AoEs. At 2 costs, being a 1/1 that quests for 1, Bucky, Squirrel, Squeak, Tutor, has Ward, and whenever you play a Floodborn character, each opponent chooses and discards a card. It seems to have quite the potential, but in general, you're not going to have enough Floodborn characters at a low enough cost to make it really do much, is my initial thought. I would love to be proved wrong, but in general, I think it is just a 2.0, maybe even only a 1.5. It has Ward, but it's just a 1/1 and only quests for 1, and it makes your 4-drop make your opponent discard a card. Cheshire Cat from the Shadows, costing 8, being a 5/6 that lures for 2. Pretty expensive for not very much lore gain in the numbers. But then you see that has Shift 5 and Evasive and tap Banish Chosen damaged character, and it looks a lot better. Being able to sneak in for 5 off of a 2 or 3 cast cat, pretty effective way, and then you can use it to quickly tap to banish an opponent's damaged character that you might not have had a way to deal with otherwise. And then it's just going to slowly abyss your opponent's creatures. I think it's a solid 3.0. Has potential to be like a 1 or 2 of in a green mid-range deck. Cheshire Cat, always grinning. It's a 2-cast 3/2 that quests for 1. Its basic only use for this is going to be to shift that 8-drop. It's a solid 1.5 card. It's not going to do too much. It can attack. It's much better in limited. But then when you consider the fact that it's the cheapest Cheshire Cat that you can shift onto, it's probably going to be a 2.5 just for that fact alone. Daisy Duck's Secret Agent, a 4-cost 2/3 that quests for 2. The numbers are okay. Questing for 2 is like the bare minimum at this point for 4 higher unless it has a very good ability. And Daisy Duck's ability is not that bad. Being able to constantly make your opponent discard a card every turn after it starts questing is pretty big. And as we'll see later with another version of Donald Duck, like to take advantage of this, and that Donald Duck drawing extra cards each turn, I think they're going to work pretty well together, and if there's a discard deck, those two will probably be in it together. She's a solid 3.0. She's going to basically be able to slowly put pressure on your opponents over and over. She could even fill in the set 1 meta, being in most of the Emerald aggro decks against the Be Prepared decks, as if this gets to quest, it is going to slowly take away their card advantage, and you might be able to get a Be Prepared out of their hand early enough in the game. Donald Duck, Perfect Gentleman, a 4-cost 2/5, quests for 2, has Shift 3, and the big part is at the beginning of your turn, each player may draw a card. It's going to be relevant for 2 reasons. One is that it's going to make your Prince John trigger more, because eventually they're going to run out of cards in hand, and if they're playing each card they draw, your Prince John's not going to be drawing you extra cards. You're going to have discard spells that don't do anything. This is going to keep your hand full and give you at least 1 card to make them discard each turn. This card probably does not see play in every deck. It definitely would see play in the green steel mill, as well as possibly seeing play in... Overall, I think this card is about a 2.5. It has the potential to be quite a role player in some decks, but I would not just put it into any deck and think it would perform. The deck has to be prepared around it. Donald Duck Sleepwalker, a 3-ink, 0/5, quests for 1 lore, and whenever you play an action it gets +2 attack. Fairly subpar, doesn't have a high quest, has no attack, it has a big butt, and it's inkable. Basically a 1.5, not too exciting. Cool art though. Dr. Facilier is a 7-ink, 4/4, quests for 3, has evasive. Whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character can't quest during their next turn. It does a lot, but it's fairly expensive. Probably not going to see much play, but it's pretty powerful. Brave Little Tailor Mickey had a little bit more lore, was very similar, and it closed some games, so I could very much see this card seeing some play, but just not really being a big staple in the format. It's a solid 3.0. Enchantress Unexpected Judge, 2 cost, 1/1, quest for 2 lore. While it's challenged, it gets +2 attack. Not bad. There's a very high amount of 2 cost double lore cards in the set, which is good. Definitely something the aggro decks need, and it's good to have a selection of what you want. And this has a nice ability of basically taking down anything that has 3 or less defense when they're trying to attack and be aggressive into it. Just don't do what some of my opponents have done and misread it, thinking that in a challenge it gets that, because I've had people just blindly attack thinking it's going to deal 3 damage. Even with the high abundance of these 2 lores, at that alone it's a 2.0. And the ability to be able to kill those other units just is a nice gravy, but still not that great. Flynn Rider, his own biggest fan, is a 4 cost 2/3 quest for 4. While it might look like it gains 4 lore at a glance, it actually gets -1 lore for each card in your opponent's hand. Does have evasive, and it shifts for 2 to come out quite early if you need to, or at least quite cheap. If it sees a lot of play, it'll probably be based on either a very unique heavy discard deck, or being discarded to the queen to gain lore from its printed value. In general, it's a solid 2.5. Flynn Rider, Confident Vagabond, 1 cost, 1/3, quest for 1. The only reason you'd basically want to play this card is to shift the Flynn we were just looking at. Get it in for 2. It's not going to quest for much at that cost, but it can sing songs, and possibly on turn 5 or 6, it would be able to just drop in and then quest for 3 or 4 depending on the matchup. Gaston, Scheming Suitor, at 2 cost, 1/3, quests for 1. While 1 or more opponents have no cards in hand, this character gets +3 attack. Not very impressive, just an okay 1.5. Only getting 1 lore, only having 1 attack, unless your opponent somehow has no cards in hand, and at that point, like, you probably don't need the extra attack. You probably want more lore gain. Hypnotize, a 3 cost action that makes each opponent choose and discard a card, and then you draw a card. In general, if a discard deck is pretty widely played, it's possible this sees play just because it cantrips and it's inkable. It's still kind of lackluster. It's just kind of a 2.5, but it could be a player in the discard deck. I think we really need more of a look at target player's hand and choose and discard a card to deal with certain heavy hitters. This just doesn't seem to really do enough. Improvise, a 1 cost action that gives chosen character +1 attack and you draw a card. Not too spectacular, but it replaces itself. It triggers all the units that have abilities that trigger off of actions being cast. It lets you trade up in combat. In limited, this card is very good. I would say in constructed, it's probably a solid 3 if it's something you want to be doing, but so far in Lorcana, just +1 attack and then drawing a card is not that good. So I'm just going to say it's a 2.5. 6 cost, 6/6, quest for 2 lore, rare. Little John, loyal friend. It's a good thing you're loyal because I would never play you. A 1.0. Should be common. Lucifer, Cunning Cat, a 5 cost, 2/2, quest for 2. When you play it, each opponent chooses and discards 2 cards or an action. It needed to be a little bit bigger, in my opinion, for me to want to play this. It's just going to always die in combat, so the 2 lore doesn't matter as much. It's a little hefty for its cost. I think there will be enough actions played because songs are so powerful that a lot of times it might only get 1 card. That said, the potential for this to be backbreaking is quite high. And a You Have Forgotten Me followed up by this could be devastating. But I'm still only going to give it a 2.0. It's lacking in a lot of departments. Pack Tactics, a 4 cost action that you gain a lore for each damage character opponents have in play. Seems quite hard to set up. your opponents are not always going to be flooding the board with units, or there'll be units that only have one defense, so they'll just die instead of staying in play, or they could be a heal deck and they'll just heal them and draw cards. In general, this is quite lackluster and rare to boot. Here we have another 1.0 rare, probably a 0.5. I understand the desire to have something like this in the game, but I feel like this would probably be better attached to some 5 or 6 drop character that says when it quests, gain a lore for each damage character an opponent has in play. To be able to maybe make something that only quests for 1, quests for 3 or 4. Pain Underworld Imp, a 2-cost 1/4. While it has 5 or more attack, it gets +2 lore to quest in for 3. Does not seem that bad if you're playing an aggressive deck that is playing the Queen to pump with the support of +4 on it and then minus on attack. You could really trigger that quickly. Otherwise, it's probably hard to get 4 more attack onto it unless you're based on support. Could work quite well with the new Blue Bell. In general, it's going to be a 2.5. You're not going to play it that often unless you have a lot of ways to trigger it in a very synergistic. At a 3-cost 2/3, quest for 2 lore, Panic Underworld Imp is going to be one of those synergistic cards you need to be playing with that 2-drop to make it see its true potential. When it comes into play, it gives another unit +2 attack, similar to Meg, and if the chosen character is Pain, it gets +4 attack instead, and it's just going to turn on that Pain to quest in for 3 lore on turn 3 for 1 turn. Uninkable, it's a 2.0. It's a role player, but it's just not that good of a role to be playing, and is most likely unneeded. A 5-cost 3/4 that quests for 2, Pete Bad Guy, has a lot of words on his card. He has Ward. Whenever you play an action, he gets +2 attack. When he has 7 or more attack, he gets +2 lore. It's definitely a card that you can build around it using the aforementioned Pain card to plus attack. You can use the Improvise to plus up his attack as well as drawing a card. It has potential, but still is only a 2.5. It just really needs a lot going for it to push it over. It just seems unlikely that the extra effort you're putting to get those few lore is worth it. Prince John Greediest of All, a 3-cost 1/2, quests for 2, has Ward, and whenever your opponent discards 1 or more cards, you may draw a card for each card discarded. This card has created a lot of hype. In general, if there's a discard deck, this is probably going to be a key component to maintain the amounts of cards you have in your hand. And mixed with the 4-drop Donald Duck, to guarantee your opponent is drawing a card each turn, so you can trigger to make them discard a card. You're going to double that, and with this Donald Duck and your draw for turn, you'll get 3 cards a turn to hopefully deal with your opponent's 2 cards that they have. And while it does seem like a lot of work to do, it's a pretty solid 2.5. Has the potential to be a 4. If there's a discard deck that's good, this is going to be part of it, but it is not standalone and requires a lot of work to go. Queen of Hearts, Quick Tempered, a 2-cost 1/2, quests for 2. When you play it, it deals 1 damage to chosen damaged opposing character. Might see some play with Rockstar. In general, I would rate this as a 2.0. Not being inked is kind of hurting it, but it does quest for 2. And it's a solid 2.5. It has something you can shift onto it. It quests for 2. It's cheap. It has some big downfalls in only being a 1/2, and the fact that it's uninkable. There's quite a few other queens that will probably see play with some having shift, so it's going to see a little bit of play in some green-red. Ratigan, Criminal Mastermind, a 4-cost 4/1, quest for 2, has evasive. It's going to trade with most evasive creatures. 4-cost quest for 2 that can't be attacked by everything. It's okay. Not much to really say about it, just a solid 2.5 card. Ratigan's Marvelous Trap, a 3-cost item that you banish to make each opponent lose 2 lore. Currently, I just don't think this really does much. It's possible that you can rebuy this item using some blue cards to be able to keep your opponent from winning, and then slowly gain card advantage from replaying the item. But in general, it's not inkable, it's kind of expensive, and it just does not do too much. A 1.0 because it's uninkable and there's just not much really to reward you for making your opponents lose lore outside of just them losing lore. We would need something that would trigger whenever opponents lost lore to make this see more play. Ray, easygoing Firefly, a 5 cost 3/3, quest for 3, has evasive. It's going to be fighting for other 5 drops in this role, but in general I think it is a decently positioned 3.0. It's not going to see play in every green deck, but most of the green aggressive decks I think it's going to see play. It's going to kill off some of the cheaper evasives while still dying to others, but also questing for 3 and requiring a specialty creature or removal to deal with it is not bad. And I think there's going to be less people playing Smash right away, so it might be able to dive underneath some of those and not die to the currently played removal spells. Ring the Bell, a 3 cost action to banish chosen damaged character. Not that great, but not that bad. You'll be able to take advantage of cards like Tinkerbell and Grab Your Swords to be able to deal with higher cost units. If it was a song, it'd be a little bit better. It's at least inkable. I'm not a huge fan, but it's going to do work. It's probably fantastic in limited. I would say it's a 1.5 in constructed. The Queen, Disguised Peddler, a 3 cost 2/3, lures for 0. But you can choose and discard a character card to gain lore equal to its discarded character's lore cost. This could be a sneaky sneak of a card. This could have some breakout potential. Being able to discard Goofies or Taylor Mickeys or Flynn's to gain 4+ lore is quite big. Being able to use LeFou to untap it or Shield to untap it to reuse its ability multiple times in a turn to gain anywhere between 4 and 12 lore in a big burst could definitely see some play. The fact it's uninkable and it's only really a 1 or 2 use before you're out of resources has enough downfalls, and requiring a lot of card draw, it's probably only going to be a 2.5, but it has the potential to really close out some games in some matchups as the aggressive deck. And that potential can really just finish up giving you those last few points you need. Tiana, True Princess, 5/3, quest for 3, cost 5. Already a few of these fighting for this position of a 5 cost triple lore. It's a 2.0. It just cannot compete with Cusco killing units that attack it. It cannot compete with Mad Hatter drawing cards. It cannot compete with Ray having evasiveness. It just seems to be one of the weaker ones, but it has amazing art. Verana, Fang Chief, 5/5, cost 5, quest for 2. Very mid, 1.0. Well, that's it for this set review. I'll have another one in another couple of days. If you want to check that out, please like and subscribe. I'll try to get more of this content out for you soon. And thanks for watching.